A patient walks into UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He needs a liver transplant. He moves to the top of the donor list, ahead of dozens of American patients who have been waiting for years. That patient is one of the most powerful Yakuza bosses in the world. A container ship docks at the port of Long Beach. Inside is industrial equipment. The shipping company has 11 years of clean customs records. Only 3% of containers are inspected. This one is not in the 3%. What is actually inside that container will end up in American bodies in cities across the country. The Yakuza is not a Japanese problem. It has not been for 40 years. It operates in specific American cities, through specific businesses, specific neighborhoods, specific networks that the FBI has been tracking for decades. But what most people do not know is which cities the Yakuza actually controls in 2026. The names, the neighborhoods, the businesses. The boss is still operating today. Some of these cities you would expect. Some of them you absolutely would not. Let's go through them. The American cities where the Yakuza still runs everything. Honolulu, Hawaii. It is Honolulu, the largest Yakuza operational center in the United States. The city where the organization has been embedded for so long and so deeply that federal investigators have spent 5 decades trying to understand the full scope of its presence. So how did Honolulu become the heart of Yakuza operations in America? The answer goes back to the 1970s. Hawaii was the first stop for Yakuza expansion outside Japan for one specific reason: geography. The Hawaiian Islands sit halfway between Japan and the American mainland. They have a substantial Japanese-American population dating back to the late 1800s. They have major shipping infrastructure. Was not focused on drugs. It was focused on tourism. Well, all connected through layers of corporate structure to organizational interests in Tokyo and Kobe. Higa testified that he had personally witnessed payments flowing between these businesses and Yakuza figures who never set foot in the United States. The payments were untraceable through normal banking systems. They were structured through cash businesses that processed enough physical currency to disguise organizational money inside legitimate revenue. Higa's testimony led to several federal prosecutions in the late 1990s. It did not end the operation. The operation simply restructured. New business names, new corporate entities. The same organizational money continued to flow. Today, Honolulu remains the most documented Yakuza operational center in the United States. The DEA Pacific Division estimates that 15% of methamphetamine entering Hawaii. Medical Center in Los Angeles. He had moved to the top of the donor list, ahead of dozens of American patients who had been waiting for years. How did this happen? According to a federal investigation that followed, Godu had paid UCLA Medical Center over $100,000 in donations. He had also, according to investigative journalist Jake Adelstein, who broke the story, made arrangements with the FBI directly. Godu had agreed to provide intelligence on Yakuza operations in exchange for a U.S. visa that allowed him to receive medical treatment unavailable to him in Japan. The intelligence Godu provided was, by some accounts, useful. By other accounts, it was minimal, just enough to honor the technical terms of his agreement without exposing anything that mattered. Either way, here is what is undisputed. Godu received a liver that should have gone to an American patient. He returned to Japan after the transplant. He continued running his criminal organization for years afterward. He was eventually expelled from the Yamaguchi-gumi in 2008 for unrelated reasons. He retired publicly. He wrote an autobiography. But the UCLA scandal revealed something disturbing about Yakuza operations in Los Angeles. The organization had connections deep enough to American institutions that a Yakuza boss could obtain medical treatment ahead of waiting American patients. With FBI cooperation, at one of the most prestigious medical centers in the country, Los Angeles is the second largest Yakuza operational center in the United States. The Little Tokyo neighborhood has been a base of organizational presence for decades. Real estate, restaurants, import businesses, and entertainment industry connections all overlap with documented Yakuza interests. In 2012, the United States Treasury Department designated Yamaguchi-gumi leader Kenichi Shinoda and several senior associates under transnational criminal organization sanctions. The designation made it illegal for American persons or businesses to engage with the designated individuals. Within 12 months of the designation, federal investigators documented over 40 Yamaguchi-gumi-connected business relationships in the Los Angeles area being restructured to comply technically while continuing to function operationally. The money kept moving. The operations kept running. Today, Los Angeles continues to host one of the largest Yakuza-connected business networks outside Japan. Las Vegas, Nevada. Here is the city where the Yakuza connection is the least visible and the most lucrative. Las Vegas has had a documented Yakuza presence since the 1970s. The reasons are obvious. Las Vegas is the gambling capital of the United States. The Yakuza historically organized gambling tourism for wealthy Japanese visitors. The two ecosystems were natural partners. But what most people do not know is how the relationship evolved. By the 1990s, the Las Vegas casino industry had become one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country. Background checks on every executive, monitoring of every large transaction, strict requirements for identifying the source of any funds entering the casino system. The Yakuza adapted. Instead of operating directly inside the casino industry, Yakuza-affiliated networks built businesses around it. Tourism company that brought Japanese gamblers to Las Vegas. Money exchange services that facilitated currency transactions for those gamblers. Real estate operations that purchased and managed Las Vegas properties as investments for Japanese clients with complicated financial backgrounds. Restaurant and entertainment businesses serving the high-end Japanese tourist market. Every business legitimate on its own. Every business operating in a regulatory gray zone where the connections to organizational interests in Japan were difficult to document but real. A federal organized crime investigator who worked Las Vegas cases for over 15 years described this in an interview published in 2021. He said, "The Yakuza in Las Vegas does not look like the mob. It does not look like cartels. It looks like Japanese tourism infrastructure. Restaurants that serve Japanese clientele. Real estate offices that handle Japanese investors. Money exchanges that handle yen." He said 95% of those businesses are completely legitimate. The 5% that are not are protected by the legitimacy of the others. He said, "We cannot prosecute legitimate businesses. We can prosecute specific transactions. The structure makes specific transactions almost impossible to identify with certainty." In 2014, federal prosecutors in Nevada brought charges in a case called Operation Front Row that targeted a Yakuza-affiliated network operating through Las Vegas. The investigation had taken 8 years to build. It produced 4 convictions. It did not touch the senior leadership of the network. It did not significantly disrupt the underlying operations. The convictions were celebrated as a federal success. The operation continued. Las Vegas remains today one of the most active Yakuza operational centers in the United States, operating through infrastructure that looks, on paper, exactly like the legitimate Japanese tourism industry it has been embedded with for 50 years. San Francisco, California here is the case that shows how the Yakuza operates inside legitimate American business at the highest levels. Suzumu Kajiyama was a senior figure in the Yamaguchi-gumi who specialized in loan sharking, providing high-interest loans to people who could not access legitimate banking, then using violence to enforce repayment. His operation in Japan was massive. By the early 2000s, Kajiyama's network had loaned tens of billions of yen to over 100,000 borrowers across Japan. He was arrested by Japanese authorities in 2003. But the investigation that followed revealed something unexpected. Kajiyama had been laundering portions of his profits through legitimate American financial institutions, including operations based in San Francisco. The structure was sophisticated. Money generated through illegal loans in Japan flowed through a series of corporate entities into legitimate investments in the United States. network that had passed through American institutions. Most of that money was never recovered. Kajiyama was convicted in Japan in 2005 and sentenced to 7 years. The American component of his network was disrupted, but not eliminated. Other Yakuza figures had been using similar structures. The arrests and convictions in this specific case did not affect the broader system. San Francisco continues today to host significant Yakuza-connected business activity. The exact scale is difficult to estimate, but federal investigators consistently identify the Bay Area as one of the top 3 American operational centers for organizational financial activity. New York City here is the city most people do not associate with the Yakuza. For decades, the Yakuza presence in New York was minimal. The Italian-American mafia controlled organized crime activity in the city through traditional structures that left little room for outside organizations. But in the 1990s and 2000s, this began to change. The Italian-American mafia had been weakened by the prosecutions of the 1980s. The federal RICO statute had been used to convict major leadership figures across all 5 families. The traditional power structure of New York organized crime had fragmented. The Yakuza did not fill the vacuum directly. Instead, the organization began establishing financial operations in New York that took advantage of the city's role as the center of American finance. Specifically, money laundering operations. A 2017 federal investigation in New York identified a network of Yakuza-affiliated shell companies that had been used to move money through American financial institutions. The investigation traced over $200 million in transactions over a 5-year period. The operation was not run from New York. It was run from Tokyo, with American intermediaries managing the day-to-day movement of funds through New York-based banks. The American intermediaries were arrested. Several were convicted on charges related to wire fraud and money laundering. Sentences ranged from 3 to 11 years. The senior leadership of the network was in Japan. None of them were extradited. None of them were charged. The operation, according to subsequent federal intelligence assessments, restructured within months. New shell companies. New intermediaries. The same flow of money continued. New York is not a major Yakuza operational center in the way that Honolulu or Los Angeles are. The Yakuza does not run businesses across New York neighborhoods or operate visible community-level infrastructure in the city. But New York is the financial center of Yakuza operation in the United States. The money that the organization generates in Honolulu, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and San Francisco often passes through New York at some point in its journey from criminal source to legitimate investment. The city's role is visible. Its scale is enormous. Seattle, Washington here is the city that became important to Yakuza operations because of its port. The Port of Seattle is one of the largest container ports on the American West Coast. It handles enormous volumes of shipping from Asia. The infrastructure required to inspect every container is impossible to maintain. The percentage of containers that are actually inspected is small. Yakuza-connected operations have been using this percentage for decades. In 2019, federal prosecutors in Washington brought charges in a case that became known as Operation Mountain Express. The investigation had identified a network that was importing methamphetamine from Asia through the Port of Seattle, then distributing it across the Pacific Northwest. The methamphetamine had been produced in Southeast Asian manufacturing networks with documented connections to Yakuza-affiliated supply chains. The shipping infrastructure that brought it to Seattle was Japanese commercial shipping. The American intermediaries who received the shipments at the port were a mix of Japanese-American business owners and Mexican cartel-affiliated distributors. The convictions in this case included American distributors. The shipping company executives in Japan were not charged. The Yakuza figures who controlled the supply network in Asia were not charged. This pattern is consistent across every Yakuza-related federal prosecution in American history. The American component of the operation can be reached. The Japanese component cannot. Seattle continues today to be a significant entry point for Yakuza-connected drug trafficking into the United States. Why law enforcement cannot reach the top here is the question every one of these cases forces us to ask. Why does the Yakuza continue to operate in American cities decades after federal investigators identified it as a major criminal threat? The answer is structural. Japan does not extradite its citizens. This is the single most important fact in understanding Yakuza operations in the United States. Every senior Yakuza figure who controls American operations is a Japanese citizen. None of them can be brought to American courts to face prosecution. None of them face the consequences that have brought down American organized crime figures in similar positions. The only Yakuza figures American prosecutors can reach are the American intermediaries who manage the day-to-day operations on U.S. soil. Those intermediaries are replaceable. When they are arrested, the Japanese leadership simply replaces them with new intermediaries. The operation continues. A senior FBI agent who worked transnational organized crime cases for over 20 years described this in a 2020 interview. He said, "We have built the most sophisticated organized crime prosecution apparatus on Earth. We can reach anyone who is on American soil. We cannot reach anyone who is not." He said, "The Yakuza understands this better than any criminal organization in the world. They have built their entire American presence around the principle that the leadership stays home. Only the replaceable parts of the operation are exposed." He said, "We can disrupt. We can prosecute. We can seize assets when we find them. We cannot end an operation whose leadership is permanently beyond our reach." This is why the Yakuza still runs significant operations in Honolulu, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, and other American cities in 2026. Not because law enforcement is incompetent. Because the architecture of international law was not designed to handle organizations sophisticated enough to separate decision-making from jurisdiction. What this looks like today, walk through Little Tokyo and Los Angeles today, and you will see legitimate restaurants, legitimate businesses, legitimate community infrastructure. The Yakuza presence is invisible. Walk through the tourist districts of Honolulu, and you will see legitimate hotels, legitimate tourism operations, legitimate Japanese cultural businesses. The Yakuza presence is invisible. Walk through the casinos of Las Vegas, and you will see one of the most heavily regulated industries in America. The Yakuza presence does not appear in any visible form. This is the strategic vision of Yakuza operations in the United States in 2026. Invisibility through legitimacy. The senior FBI agent quoted earlier described this as the Yakuza's most sophisticated achievement. He said, "The visible parts of organized crime, the patches, the tattoos, the violence, are what allow law enforcement to identify and target organized crime networks. The Yakuza understood, decades before other organizations, that visibility is vulnerability. The American patients waiting for liver transplants stay on the waiting list, while wealthy Yakuza bosses receive priority medical treatment in exchange for FBI intelligence cooperation. The federal agents who fight these operations and why those tools are not yet working. The next video goes exactly there. I'll put it here. Because the Yakuza has been operating in American cities for 50 years. Most of those years have looked like this. The next 50 will probably look the same.